With the wealth of graphically intensive RPGs releasing this year, it might be easy to overlook some of them coming out of Japan. Developer FuRyu is well known within the JRPG community for their creative approach to this genre, but they typically have the backing of publishers like NIS America or Xseed, at least to assist with the global release. However, that's not actually the case for their newest game, Varlet, which is set to be their first self-published title. In many ways, this is evident in what this team is trying to deliver through this adventure. The result is just several ideas and inspiration stitched together in hopes that it works. But in the end, it turns out to be a messy and almost unfamiliar experience. This surface level outing may find its audience, but what's here is an ambitious attempt at a traditional high school setting JRPG, and while that may mesh easily with some players, I do have some feedback.
私はアルカ先輩に憧れてるんですよ。すごいですよね。マイナーなローカルアイドルが一気に全国レベルで人気になって、でもそれってリオナ先輩の事件が報道された頃ですよね。だからアルカ先輩が襲われたら次は私が有名になる番かなって。
Varlet frames self-discovery inside a school rumor mill that turns out to be real. The setting is Kausei Academy, which has a second world full of glitches that ends up bleeding into the campus through what is known as desire. People get replaced by monsters, students whisper, and the S.S.S. attempts to patch the holes before the place collapses. On paper, this is all just a classic setup that should let the team dig into messy teenage headspace, but in practice, the narrative simply plays it safe. Each episode introduces a student with a problem built around ego, jealousy, or something like spite. You walk through their issue, eventually trip into a glitch, confront a desired-shaped boss, and then the story progresses. These chapters move pretty quickly and often wrap up the moment they become interesting. And sure, it's convenient for progression, but less helpful for emotional payoff. I kept waiting for one of the chapters to linger a little longer, or complicate a first impression, or even to let a consequence ripple into the next week, but the structure rarely allowed for that. What actually kept me engaged wasn't the mystery, but the cast's energy. The party forms around the protagonist rather than already being best friends. They tease, they undercut, and they crack jokes that probably go a little too far for a school club, but it actually worked for me.
おはよう。どう？クラスの友達に。そっか。え？ノアにも友達がいたんだ。
The banter lands often enough that I looked forward to the club activities even when the plot was just connecting dots. FuRyu clearly knows how to ride a casual hang, and it shows up here. Your day runs on a simple rhythm. You go to school, check S.S.S. requests, poke at the current mystery, sleep, and then repeat it all until it's over. Early on, the S.S.S. tasks feel like a checklist when you can go around the school and do little activities. Later chapters, however, quickly reduce that friction, which leads me to believe that the developers admit that these errands have overstayed their welcome. I do feel like this is the right call though, as the fun of the S.S.S. turns into meeting strange students and then filling out your notebook with little personal details that give personality to each of them. During this time, you can also hunt for some secret glitches, though there is rarely a reason to do so unless you have a mission for it. You'll pretty much be running around the area activating your sonar to pick up lost items. That said, yes, expect to be pressing the sonar button constantly. Experience and money come faster in regular dungeons, and the money itself barely even matters since there's not much worth saving for. Still, the loop respects your time by letting you skip or dip out whenever you're ready. Conversations feed a 6-axis personality chart called the Triad. Your choices in dialogue will nudge the meters, where you can unlock new dialogue lines and passively buff some skills in combat. I actually kinda like this idea as it pushes you to answer naturally and live with the character that reflects those impulses. The problem though is actually readability. After a few hours it becomes easy to guess which answer will feed which stat, and the game rewards that predictability with clear outcomes. The system still adds a personal tilt to scenes, and it gates some flavorful lines that make your version of the hero feel specific, but it rarely surprised me. The promise of multiple endings is cool, but the journey to those branches would carry more weight if the responses felt risky in the moment. Combat utilizes a timeline command system where turn order matters and you can push the flow to your favor. Each character can lean into a leader role that supports allies or a ruler role that prioritizes raw output. Characters can also earn skill points from these fights that feed into a simple skill tree, which is mostly just upgradable base stats and improvable abilities. Once you learn who hits first, or if you can sneak behind the target, you can then spam through chains and steamroll some rooms. I recommend bumping the difficulty up as soon as you feel that curve flatten, but the bosses are where the combat opens up. You chip away at their defenses and bind the enemy after you've broken them, and then you can unleash a cinematic finisher that speeds up the whole encounter. It's a good spectacle, and more importantly, it clarifies why you built a party a certain way. Break, bind, burst, repeat. There's a nice rhythm when a fight lasts long enough to demand resource management instead of auto attacks though, and sometimes you'll have to heal, but I rarely did. I wish the campaign leaned into that rhythm more often too. Regular mobs linger in areas that you've outgrown, and the game doesn't provide a quick, clear option for truly trivial encounters. This setup just ends up adding padding to the overall runtime without adding any tensions. Glitches themselves are themed dungeons born from the character's desires, which gives the team plenty of room to get creative. The layouts use simple puzzles to break up the corridors where you flip switches, build makeshift paths, and occasionally stop to try and sneak attack an enemy. These dungeons rarely overstay their welcome, but they also rarely surprise. I ended up running into a feeling that I had with a few PS3 era mid-tier JRPGs where the map completes before the concept fully lands. The quick turnover keeps the story moving, but it also prevents these areas from leaving much of a mark, as their current form is just simple theme swaps. I should also mention that some characters are dateable, however you don't shower them with gifts or anything like that, and you don't have to even really grind affinity meters by the gaming calendar. Instead, at the end of certain days, you can pick who you want to go home with, and then sometimes you get a pick from a small set of scenes when the story allows it. But I should mention that the game tells you which spots are the best place to progress a relationship. I appreciated this low-pressure approach as it fits in with the rest of the design. The trade-off though is agency, as it can feel like you're riding a lightly guided rails through your preferred route rather than carving in a unique path. FuRyu usually nails music and character design, and that's still the case here. The compositions set the right tone for the quiet school days, and the boss arenas are a nice extra weight. The party reads well on screen, and the broader student body has just enough style to keep social scenes lively during dialogue. Environments themselves will rarely impress, but they pull from the familiar school setting, and they get the job done without much flair. I need to say though that this team really needs to pay attention to their menu UI, as here is just a bit too basic with simple gradients, and yeah, I just didn't like the reading of it. Varlet is a compact JRPG that took about 16 to 20 hours to complete. The length actually makes sense for the scale of the systems. The trouble though is tuning. The S.S.S chores lose some steam as the game gracefully steps out of their way. The money economy never matters. The regular fights roll over unless you restrain yourself. And then finally, when the boss cadence actually kicks in, the timeline flow and the bind window showcase an experience that I wouldn't mind in every battle. This is where the self-published nature actually shows. It feels like FuRyu used Varlet to try out a handful of systems, proved out some pipelines, and delivered a serviceable package that doesn't ask too much. I'll be honest and say I do see value in that, as not every JRPG needs to stretch to 100 hours, but the challenge is that the game often shows you the outline of a stronger version of itself, and then it moves on. Varlet is a confident throwback with modern edges that mostly serve convenience. It borrows school life scaffolding that we all know, folds in a personality chart that reflects how you like to respond, and then sets you loose in a bite-sized dungeon that gets you where you're going rather quickly. The story keeps to familiar lanes and the systems rarely push back. I never felt annoyed, but I also didn't feel like I was having a significant amount of fun. The reason I kept playing was actually the party dynamic, and maybe to see the next boss fight. If you want a compact JRPG that respects your time and gives you a few levers to pull without demanding a spreadsheet or anything complex like that, this will likely scratch that itch. As a weekend comfort play, Varlet definitely works. Noisy Pixel is giving Varlet a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.